Every town has an archive somewhere, a place where the old records are kept. Birth registers, death certificates, land deeds, going back further than anyone can reliably remember. Most of them are dry, dusty, unremarkable, but there's this one library, and I've heard this story from enough different people in enough different places, but I believe there's truth at the centre of it somewhere, where the records go further back than they should. Not just further back in time, but further back than the town itself. A researcher discovered it first. He was visiting to trace some local history for a project nobody would ever read. They were given access to the archive room in the basement. Old shelves, old smell, the particular silence that only the oldest buildings have. She started with the recent records, census data, parish registers, standard material, but then she found a shelf at the back that the librarian hadn't mentioned. The records on that shelf were older, much older. The paper was different, thicker, slightly waxy, as if it had been treated to survive. The handwriting was dense and careful, in a script she almost recognised but couldn't quite read. She spent an hour with those records before she started to understand what she was looking at. They weren't birth records, they weren't death records, they were arrival records. Every person who had ever come to that town, not been born there, but arrived, was listed. Name, date, and where they came from. Next to each entry, in a different ink, there was a departure date. She ran her finger down the columns at first, then, with growing unease, every single person who had arrived in that town had a departure date recorded. Every single one. She told herself it was just for a record keeping, that someone had gone back through history and updated the records as people left. Then she noticed something that made her close the book carefully and sit very still for a moment. The departure dates weren't filled in after the arrival date. The ink was the same age as the arrival entries. Whoever kept those records knew when people were leaving before they left. She looked for her own name out of curiosity, half joking, and told herself it was just an old record system and nothing more. She found her name on the third page from the back. Her name, her arrival date, the day she'd driven into town 3 days ago, and next to it, there was a departure date. Tomorrow. She checked out of her accommodation that evening and drove through the night. She didn't stop until she was 3 counties away. She told me she never went back to check if the date was right. She said she didn't want to know. You see, some places have been watching longer than we've been arriving, and some records and less about history, and more about intention. So that concludes the first story for today's episode, and I'm going to give you just a 2-minute break now from storytelling to reflect on the story, have a think about what the dates were, why they were there, and also take the time to just relax. I'm going to do some tapping sounds just in the background alongside the fire crackling, just to help you get a little bit more cozy before we jump into the story about the village path. So close your eyes and stay relaxed. What do you think about the records in the library? Is it just a coincidence, or is it something maybe a little bit more sinister? I personally wouldn't ever want to find out. I'm going to turn over now to the second story for tonight's video. Finding the storybook, because this one is the village path. Did you ever hear the story of the path that changes at night? There's a path, a really old one, the kind that's been walked for centuries before anyone thought to name it, the type that runs between two villages. During the day, it's completely ordinary. Farmers have walked up and down it, children have walked up and down it, and generations of ordinary people going from one place to another. But after dark, the path doesn't go where it should. It was first noticed, or at least first recorded, by a man walking home late from the further village. He knew the path perfectly. He had walked it hundreds of times, knew every bend, every landmark. That night, he walked for what felt like 30 minutes before he stopped. He knew he should have been home in 20 minutes, so he looked around. The path looked right, the fields looked right, the sky was right. But the village wasn't there. He walked back the way he came, which was then another 20 minutes, and the first village wasn't there either. He was standing on the path that he knew perfectly, but he was in a setting that he didn't recognise or know at all. He stayed on the path. He didn't step off it. Some instinct told him the path was the only safe thing to hold on to, and so he walked for another another hour. Finally, the first village appeared ahead of him, as if it had simply decided to be there. He only had this experience one time, and he never walked that path after dark again. He would even avoid it during the day, just to be safe. But the accounts and the stories didn't stop with him. Over the years, other people reported the same thing, always on the same path, and always after dark. Every person has the same feeling of walking the right route through the wrong world, and always the same detail. While they were lost on that path, they could hear footsteps. Not their own footsteps. Somewhere behind them in the dark, steady, unhurried, and never getting closer, just following. Most people who have experienced it say the same thing when they were asked what it felt like. It wasn't necessarily frightening, but it was more like being accompanied. Like whatever walks that path at night, it wasn't threatening them, it was just curious. It was watching them and following them. The path is still there, still walked every day, but the people who live near it are always home before dark. If you ever find yourself on an old path at night and you hear footsteps behind you that aren't yours, don't turn around. Don't step off the path, and don't stop walking. I'm going to close the storybook there. That's all we have time for tonight. What do you think follows on the path? What do you think it could be, and why is it there? I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode, and I hope you were able to get nice and relaxed before the week begins, or whenever you're watching it really. Be sure to